Welcome back everyone, it's Mags, coming at you with a very special title in Nipponichi Software's developer catalog. Special in that it is unlike any of the other projects they've made, at least that NIS has been bothered to localize, and also special because I just really like it. Did you know that NIS, of Disgaea fame, made a murder mystery visual novel? Not many people do, for one because it's relatively recent, originally releasing in Japan in 2021 and localized in 2023, but also because it really did not get much attention, even by NIS's standards. This company is very well known for their strategy RPGs like Disgaea and Phantom Brave, but the experimental and quirky nature of their work does not stop there. They have always been dedicated to giving their developers the freedom to create smaller titles born out of their own unique ideas, made simply because they were passionate about them. This is how we've gotten such a wild variety in their quite dense output, and how we've ended up with beloved games like Yomawari, Mad Rat Dead, and The Liar Princess and the Blind Prince. Unfortunately, not all these games end up being localized. There are a ton of them that have still never left Japan, and those are only getting more and more common these days, the most prominent example right now popularity-wise being Bar Stella Abyss, although that didn't stop them from putting a character from it in Phantom Brave The Lost Hero. All of this to say, a visual novel of all things, known as Tantai Bokumetsu, did not seem like the kind of game to make the cut. But against all odds, it was announced by NISA for a localized release under the name Process of Elimination for PS4 and Switch, to lukewarm reception. Critically, it actually seemed like a pretty big success. Everything I've seen reviewed and rated it pretty highly, as they should, but it just never really got the public popularity to match. And that's so unfortunate, because the way I see it, that means even less of a chance that we get these kinds of games from NIS localized in the future. Especially because I was blown away by this game. I genuinely think this is one of the best examples of the unapologetic passion the folks over at NIS have for their work. And I hope I can properly convey why in this video, and what makes this game so special. Process of Elimination very often gets compared to one other very popular series time and time again, Danganronpa. Because it's a murder mystery, I guess. I've played the Danganronpa games, by the way, I love them. I may or may not have streamed the entire series on Twitch like 5 years ago as my very first internet thing that I did, so it definitely holds a special place in my heart.
You've reached a conclusion. Alright then, let's begin ballet time. Oh, ballet!
But here's the thing about comparisons like that. They are, much more often than not, very surface level, so I try not to put too much stock into statements like that. And that is definitely the case here. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't doubt it for a second if you told me it was at least inspired by Danganronpa. You can draw a lot of comparisons when it comes to its overall aesthetic and basic plot scenario, not to mention the protagonist's design. But Process of Elimination absolutely has its own unique identity. This isn't a pure VN, there are actually some really cool, probably more in-depth than you would think, gameplay sections, and we'll certainly get to that later. Process of Elimination follows the protagonist Wato Hojo, who dreams of becoming a detective. Society's been thrown into somewhat of a craze due to a particular incident that skyrocketed crime, with one of these post-incident criminals being particularly notable, a serial killer known as the Quartering Duke, who's been racking up an inhuman body count. But when crime increases, so does the activity of the people seeking to stop it, and thus a detective boom also occurred. Wato's detective dream, however, does not stem from the current boom, but rather a personal incident that occurred 10 years ago, where he was caught up in a mass kidnapping and had to watch a beloved friend die in front of him, unable to save her. That is why he wants to become a detective, to help people and to protect anything and anyone that he can. He especially looks up to, like many others, the only official government-recognized detective organization, known as the Detective Alliance, said to employ only the country's absolute best, many of which are essentially celebrities in the detective world. Wato, as a college student, works part-time for a small detective agency, but ends up getting scouted by none other than the Detective Alliance, despite being basically a nobody and not even a very good detective. Instead of being hospitably transported to their headquarters and met with warm greetings, however, he's forcibly kidnapped by them and awakens on a secluded island 3 days later with 12 other detectives from the Alliance. Everyone was told they were attending a meeting to discuss how to deal with the Quartering Duke, but only Wato was actually kidnapped. Everyone else was, in fact, kindly escorted. By the time Wato finally wakes up though, everything is already in complete disarray, with a mass murder of over 20 miscellaneous Alliance staff having been poisoned during their time on the island, leaving these 13 ranked Alliance detectives alone to figure things out. Wato, of course, is immediately thrown in the hot seat on account of nobody recognizing him, so he has to spend a while fighting everyone's suspicion. Not too long in, over the course of their first investigation, the group concludes that the Quartering Duke themselves must be on the island with them, sparking even more panic, and the game goes from there, with everyone everyone trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and ultimately unraveling the mystery of the quartering duke. Naturally, more murders ensue, culprits are caught, your standard murder mystery shenanigans. Soon into the game, the group specifically gets trapped in a giant manor, one of only 2 buildings on the tiny island. And that really is the setup. There's not a super well-defined formula that each chapter follows, like something you'd see in Danganronpa where you always have your free time, you always have your trials, the culprit is guaranteed to be killed off right after, etc. Process of Elimination plays around with its structure. Each chapter does contain a murder, and you then have to investigate that murder, but it feels much more freeform in the way things play out. Really, the entire game is good at keeping things fresh. You'll almost be tricked into thinking you know what the general flow is going to be for the rest of the game, only for everything to go completely wacko, and suddenly you have no idea what's going to happen or where they're going to go next. The setting changes up on you, culprits don't necessarily have to die or go away at all, so characters have to deal with occupying the same space as now known killers. It's got some really interesting dynamics by not really establishing a rule set. It's really just that these detectives are on the island and shit happens. You just know because of the nature of the genre that someone's going to kill someone at some point, but that's really it. And I love this whole cast. I don't think there's a single character I don't at least like, if not adore. Some are definitely more fleshed out than others, but they're all at least there with very enjoyable personalities. I'd imagine it's difficult when you have such a big cast to really hone in on everyone, but as that cast steadily grows smaller and smaller, there's room for characters to be more prominent that maybe weren't before, so you'll really have the chance to get attached to everyone. I knew pretty early on that I was going to really miss these characters when the game was over and all was said and done, and I do. Everyone has distinct personalities, and the interactions between them all became one of my favorite things about this game. Watto quickly goes from being suspected by everyone, to being tolerated, and then to being accepted, and slowly, without you even thinking about it, he's getting to know everyone and bringing them all together as a team. It's not long before the cast really feels like a group of true comrades, but at the same time, there's always a tense air to it. Not only because you as a player know someone is going to die, but because of the ever-present suspicion of one of them being the quartering duke. There's a serious running theme of trust and how difficult it can be. There's no way to know who it is, and they partly cope by thinking that even if the quartering duke is still on the island, it doesn't necessarily have to be one of them. They could just be hiding somewhere, but the possibility is still there, and everyone has to deal with it. No one, Watto especially, wants to distrust their friends. That trust gets tested time and time again. Just to add an extra obstacle to personal connections, no one actually goes by their real name. Every detective in the Alliance falls into a ranking, and everyone goes by a chosen moniker, something detective, which is mostly decided by their big personality trait. Even other Alliance detectives don't know each other's real names. For example, Posh Detective is fancy and rich, Rowdy Detective is aggressive and quick to heat up, Workaholic Detective is... I mean, you get it, I can only consult the thesaurus so many times. You'll never guess what this guy's called! To commemorate Watto's complete inability to do literally anything, and having a whopping 0 solved cases under his belt, the group designates his moniker to the Graceful Incompetent Detective. His nameplate literally says incompetent for the entire game, and therefore that is also what I will be calling him from now on, because I'm so used to it by now, and it's funny. Despite the anonymity, the bonds they form are really something precious, and that only makes it even more tragic when something terrible happens, or when someone doesn't turn out to be who everyone thought they were. Even still, Incompetent won't give up on anyone. Lies and deception from those you trust take a heavy toll, but no matter what happens, he tries to understand and he tries to forgive, even when it comes to those among them who have committed the worst atrocities. You get to understand these characters on a deep level through that kind of exploration, all thanks to Incompetent's kind heart and refusal to just write anyone off. There's something so human about it that I haven't quite seen from much else. He will keep placing his trust in others, each time under a better understanding of who they are and what makes them tick. Because even when a tragedy does occur and someone does something terrible, there's nothing to be done but to move on. That's a big theme in this game, moving on, whether that be forgiving and forgetting or learning to cope with a tragedy. Incompetent has never seen a dead body before, and suddenly has to witness a brutally mutilated one soon after arriving on the island. He wonders how everyone else can just be eating and talking later in the day around the dinner table like nothing is wrong, but that's just it. There's nothing else they can do. Everyone hurts, but they live with it and do their best despite it all. That same idea is applied all throughout the game in a bunch of ways. No matter what happens, Incompetent learns to face it head on and to see another day despite it all. Whether that be coping with the death of a fellow detective, the betrayal of one, or just the fear that comes with the entire situation. He's immensely inspired by, and directly helped by, all the other detectives he's grown close to. Everyone's got their own ways of being kind. Workaholic and doleful are gentle souls. Mystic is open-minded and not one to dismiss anyone's thoughts and experiences. Armor can and will throw himself in danger to protect everyone literally all of the time, frequently hurting himself and even others inadvertently in the process. Even Downtown, as mean as she can sound, always has the best intentions in mind. She will scream in your face about how much you should love yourself, it's great. Despite the situation, Incompetent can't help but care deeply for everyone around him, and the kinder everyone is, the harder it is to accept that one of his comrades could be a killer. That is something he constantly wrestles with. The game knows how to be emotional, how to be intense, how to be heartbreaking, and to follow the hell through on its themes. No specifics, obviously, but I was actually bawling at the end, especially during a particular sequence. Incompetent really grows as a person, both intellectually and emotionally, and it shows as all of these ideas come together. Never stray away from the truth, keep those you've lost in your heart, never lose your humanity, look to the future. These characters and this story really ended up hitting home for me, and I cannot speak highly enough of it. However, this is a murder mystery visual novel. See, it's split into chapters. There's a death near the end of the chapter, you go investigating, and you solve the mystery of the murder. There's a particular aspect to all of this that many people may be expecting and looking forward to experiencing about it. Not to go and pick on a game for something it might not even be trying to do, but the thing is that I can't really tell whether it's trying to do it or not. I'm talking about player agency in unraveling the murders. Whereas games like Ace Attorney and Danganronpa make a big show of arguing about what happened and letting the player slowly follow the logic and answer questions themselves, Process of Elimination doesn't really do that. The only thing it offers during the actual discussions are some multiple choice questions they throw at you in dialogue, with a trust meter to go along with it. It starts in the middle and raises or lowers depending on if you get the answers right or not, with the implication that screwing up makes the group trust you less, and if it gets too low, aka empty, you get a game over. You get scored by how high it is at the end of the chapter. Maximum trust meter, maximum rank. It doesn't feel like nearly enough to make these sequences hit. If I had one monumental gripe with this game, that is it. It strikes such a weird middle ground that leaves little to no satisfaction when it comes to piecing things together. There is an entirely unique gameplay section for investigations where you go and gather evidence, but then right afterwards, Incompetent will have the whole thing solved and spend the whole scene quickly going through it with no time for anything to sink in. There's no suspense and no build-up. And some of these schemes are pretty elaborate and out there, so it really feels like some bullshit to figure out on the spot. It's not only unsatisfying, but also feels highly unrealistic and definitely took me out of the experience a bit. Even if there was no player interaction whatsoever in the discussion, they could have at least used a lot more back and forth, arguing, presenting possibilities, slowly getting closer to the truth in a more natural way. It left a pretty bad taste in my mouth almost every time. But that's just the discussion. The investigation is where all the player interaction is, and it's kind of insane, and I actually really love it. Investigations in Process of Elimination are entire grid-based mini strategy maps. You see, another big theme of this game is teamwork. Detectives are naturally egotistical and not keen on asking for help, but Incompetent's complete lack of experience and bumbling buffoonery makes him immune to these shortcomings, and is quintessential to tying the group together. In investigations, he can send messages to the other detectives through their Alliance-assigned D-pads to suggest what they should do next, basically an excuse to let you control everyone. You only have a certain amount of turns, usually 9, to complete the whole investigation. Not everybody is going to be controllable, but the ones that are, you can send direct commands to. The ones that aren't will automatically do their own thing when you end the turn, the nature of which will be indicated by the icon above their heads. Sometimes non-controllable detectives will become controllable if the investigation progresses enough. You can queue up commands and then only execute the ones you've queued with preliminary investigation, until you hit the actual investigate button, which is basically your end turn button, and every detective who hasn't done anything yet will then do something automatically. Every detective has 5 different stats that determine their ability when it comes to investigations. Movement is pretty self-explanatory, that's how far they can move in any given turn. However, you also have the option of a map-wide movement, where you can move literally anywhere. Normally you can move and take an action, but the drawback to a map-wide movement is that that's the only thing you'll be able to do that turn. Investigations progress in 3 different ways: solving mystery points, picking up evidence, and analyzing that evidence. Mystery points let detectives infer something about the area, which is a unique action you can take. Each of these points has a certain amount of MP you need to knock down, which decreases by the inferring detective's inference stat. However, another action detectives can take is assist, which utilizes the assistant stat, and it's used to support other detectives. If a detective assists another one who's inferring, the former's assistant stat will add to the latter's inference stat, acting as a boost. Solving mystery points requires multiple detectives assisting each other to get over the required MP. Then there's the evidence you can pick up. These are literally just spots on the ground that a detective can go up to and use the inspect action to gather the evidence. But their inspection stat determines how far away they can pick up evidence from. The higher the stat, the higher the radius. tedious. Picking up evidence from one of these evidence points will then still require you to analyze it, which is a separate action. This uses the final stat unique to each detective, the analyzation stat. Each piece of evidence will have a difficulty level, which is just a minimum stat requirement, so only certain detectives with high enough analyzation stats will be able to analyze certain pieces of evidence. It sounds like a lot to keep track of at first, but you quickly get used to it. And if you like strategy games, these are really cool segments that'll scratch that itch. There are a lot of mystery games that have tried various kinds of mini-games to keep the player engaged with collecting evidence and such, but a strategy RPG-like system is certainly unique, and a very NIS thing to do. I think it works super well. Strategy RPGs have always been a great way to see a big group ensemble work and fight together, and it's no different here. It really hammers home that feeling of teamwork among the group, further cementing their closeness, and gives you plenty of character interactions as they all investigate together. Every detective has unique dialogue for any given action, whether it's inferring, inspecting, etc., and you get these cool cut-ins for everyone as well. The ones that really stand out are the boosts you get from assisting, since every detective involved will get a cut-in, and it's nice to see different groups of detectives together. You even get some special inference dialogue sometimes if specific detectives solve a mystery point together, where they'll have a short conversation with each other. Like with any strategy game, these can get tedious, especially because you can't save during them. So if you lose, you have to start all over. And running out of time isn't the only way to lose, the turn limit is actually pretty generous. However, many stages will feature traps, where if any detective ends a turn caught in one of them, they'll die and you lose the whole investigation immediately. And remember, some detectives you can't control and will do their own thing, so you really need to watch the map and know what each detective plans to do and keep them out of harm's way. You can disable traps the same way you do mystery points by overpowering them with inference. These can definitely get annoying. Outside of investigations, the game has just about the kinds of bells and whistles you'd expect from a visual novel, including a keywords list, your standard vocabulary words that define various terms and phrases relevant to the story. Then there's the roster, where you can view little portraits and bios of all your fellow members of the Detective Alliance. It lists their rank, tells you about their general personality, and some of the notable cases they've solved. Some of those cases are briefly mentioned in the story, but many not so much. Don't worry though, there is still a way to read about them. While you progress through your investigation, there are a number of optional collectibles you can pick up. All those shiny red pillars of light are keywords, which you can pick up by inspecting them. This is actually how you get most of the keywords in the game. And many of those keywords are the notable cases listed in the roster, which lets you read about what they were and how they were solved. It's pretty cool to read these little tidbits about the detective's exploits outside of what you see of them in the main game. Something even more interesting, however, are residual thoughts. Due to story reasons, Incompetent can, occasionally, look into the memories of others. These thoughts will be lying around investigation maps, and only Incompetent can see them, again by inspecting them. These let you see short extra scenes that happen to specific detectives earlier in the story, and viewing them lets you learn a very specific thing about all of them that gets added to their roster. After finding all these extra tidbits, all the roster entries will be labeled as complete. The game has a chapter select, so absolutely nothing is missable. You can always go back to a chapter, and it even lets you skip straight to the investigation that way. That makes it easy to go back and get all the keywords and residual thoughts you may have missed, albeit still a little tedious due to the nature of the investigations. There are even some residual thoughts that only show up after you've finished the game in chapter select, and some carry pretty heavy story-related information. I really love that they went this extra mile to give you things to do and read outside of the main game. It even makes sense story-wise and adds a good amount of flavor and helps satiate your curiosity for more minor things that weren't touched on in the main game. Plus, it's definitely worth getting all the residual thoughts, because there's also a super secret, true post-game scene that you can only view after getting all the residual thoughts. It's such a neat little scene that circles back around on something minor in a really satisfying way. All the residual thoughts are registered in their respective sections in the gallery, and you can rewatch them from there at any time after getting them. They do still appear in the gallery if you exit the investigation map early after viewing them, without completing it, which might give you the impression that you don't have to clear the whole thing for them to be saved. However, that is not the case. Weirdly, they're still only truly registered as gotten if you've cleared the entire investigation map. So if you haven't done that, you could technically have all of them in your gallery, but still not have the trophy for getting all of them, or be able to view that special scene. Such was the case for me, causing me to have to redo maps even more, and then I got it. Just a weird thing that happens. The trophies, for completion's sake, basically just cover all these extra collectibles, such as getting and viewing all the keywords, all the residual thoughts, fully completing everyone's bios, which will come naturally with getting everything else, viewing the secret post-game scene, etc. Not really any extra heavy lifting required outside of the actual content. I honestly had no idea what to expect out of Process of Elimination. I didn't know much about it going in, I was just hankering for a weird one-off title from NIS that I was curious about, but I ended up falling in love with this game. If you like visual novels in any capacity, especially murder mystery ones, you don't want to sleep on this. Yeah, the actual player agency in solving cases is severely lacking, but it's still more than worth it for the story itself. Not to mention the really nice art style and incredible soundtrack. I love the music in this game. And I sincerely hope NIS will consider bringing over more of these kinds of titles from NIS. It's clear how much love and care was put into this game, with how cleanly and earnestly it follows through on its themes and core ideas. It's relatively short for a visual novel, landing somewhere around 15 to 20 hours, so it's not a huge commitment either. I'm incredibly glad I got to experience this, and you should too. If you want to see more NIS coverage, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. I've been Mags, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.